What you're going to see for the next half hour actually happened about, 30 or 40 years ago in a studio down in the Pioneer Square area in Seattle. It's noisy. The camera was a early model of a color portable camera, and the ambient noise, the rock music playing in the background. This was an artist studio called Triangle Studio.
Each day I printed in that series in the month of September, I often would roll out my ink and create a monotype on a poster, the 1981 posters, and make a monotype on the poster and then draw back into the ink while it was still wet. And in that way I created the composition for the updated version of the poster for the show at Stone Press.
No one could afford them.
The updated version of the monotype was then rendered into a transparent positive, which I drew,
There, I think I repaired the damage.
and that in turn was used to make negatives for the plates to be printed in a split fountain for the show, for the special poster for the show. Rolling the inks out in this way allowed me to test the colors for the printing for that day. So every day I printed in the September cycle. I did color, mixed up new colors for the print, and would usually do a monotype on
Want
one
me
of
to
the
hold it up
posters.
for you? There, I fixed the damage. I restored it. This art was only about 30 minutes old before it was finished. But 2 hours later I had restored it again.
Not only could I get different color variations using this monotype method, I made maybe 5 or 6 different versions of it, from blues and greens to oranges, very bright oranges, and darker grays and so forth, all of them blending from the bottom. But while the ink was still wet, I could draw into the ink with a end of a brush or a stick, and I could map out the composition that would finally be the poster, the composition in the poster overprinted on the earlier 1981 poster. Transfer that drawing to Mylar with ink and press type for the numbers, and using this transparent Mylar master, I could use the transparent Mylar master to make the negatives, and the negatives in turn were used to make the plates, which were of course used for the offset lithograph color on the offset press at Atomic Press. That was the 6th color printed on what was already a 5-color poster from the 1981 cyanotype show. On the last day at Triangle, other artist working was Norie Sato, and actually she did a lot of the camera work for this videotape too. She was working on one of her laminated paper pieces. It was a kind of a festive day, one of the festive days at Triangle Studios, because it was Norie's and Nancy, me's, and my last day at Triangle. So there was champagne and some goodies and lots of silliness.
See? Coffee.
Margie Byers. Another artist working in the studio that day was Beth Elliott, working on what she called her spring line in her wearable art. This was the first day that I'd been able to use my new video camera, so I spent some time in Beth's studio taping her cutouts which were from her last show at Roscoe Louie here in Seattle. I thought they made great video. I can't resist doing some teaching with the video camera around that Norie was using to record me while I printed the locus and the C-squares.
Dan Smith number 7. You know, Dan Smith number 7 is about the most ordinary black ink you can buy. And I mixed it with Dan Smith Indigo. I don't know if you can buy Dan Smith Indigo because he gave it to me as a sample. That might mean it was under development. Hope that's enough. Can you see that this is a black plate with red and black lacquer on it?
No,
Maybe in color you can.
maybe in color.
That plate has to be warmed on the hot plate to make the ink soft. Painting that plate black with lacquer, with red lacquer and black lacquer, was a kind of peculiar thing to do, but I did it primarily for myself. You see that when you print the plate that's painted that way, the paint wears down every time you ink it up and wipe it. It wears off a little of the paint. So by putting a red layer down first and then a black layer, as I printed it over the month, it would wear down through the black to the red, which would give me that kind of antique Japanese lacquerware effect. Just something that I could enjoy while I was looking at it. It also was kind of a joke because we commonly lacquer our lithograph plates in lithography. And I like to think that someone would come along and say, "Why do you lacquer your plate?" And I say, "Well, it said to do that in the book."
I have a funny RF in it that has cars in it.
I see.
Inputs and stuff.
Well, then I brayer the ink all over so it's nice and uniform before I start wiping the plate. Oh, there's one more thing that I do. I give it a little oiling. I think Beth made a mistake. I oil this end of the plate because it never gets inked, but there's some danger that it'll stick to the chine-collé print. So I want to be sure there's a little separator layer there. Now I put on my gloves and I wipe the plate. This is the last of my tarlatan. Everything's the last of. Everything I use, it's the last of this and it's the last of that. Because I worked right up to the wire. I didn't buy any new material. I just kept using my old things until they were all used up. And everything I didn't use, I sold to Debbie Van Tynen, including my press and all my ink. I used up all my plates, and the plates that I didn't use I sold to Debbie Van Tynen. And all my old plates I sold as scrap metal. I had 133 pounds of copper plates that I sold as scrap metal. And I had 60 pounds of zinc.
So how much did you get, Bill?
$50. Wasn't that clever?
Mm-hmm. Buy a couple videotapes
No, my wife's been it.
on dancing classes.
On dancing lessons. And groceries. And last night my daughter bought a record with the last of it. Let me do a paper wipe, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Click. First, you take a telephone book and you get it all sticky with this sticky transparent ink. Can you see? And then your hand sticks to it, see? And it makes a paper wiper. but you have to cool the plate a little bit. Because this takes a nice clear color on it, I don't want any black tone hanging around on the surface. See how much ink came off? It's always fun to see whose name is on here. Do you know anybody named Takayoshi? Ben Takayoshi?
Hey, yeah.
Once I took off one of these pages, and it wasn't very long ago, and it had my name on it. It did. I was in the R's, and I lifted it up, and that was the year that my name was on the top. And I looked, and it said Bill Ritchie.
So the idea is that you have two colors on the plate at once. You have an intaglio ink, which is in the incised lines, the etched out lines, which I had applied at the first and then wiped off the surfaces. Now as I completely wipe off the last residue of tone, it gets it ready for the second color, which is going to be applied with a roller. Lacquering that plate gave me the two colors that you can see here. Because the color is black, the camera isn't going to show the black that's in the actual etched lines. But every piece of the texture, every area of texture is trapping a little bit of black ink. The plate was made by photo engraving a map from the Lake Powell area. This is a map that I have composed over the last couple of years in a series called the Locus and the C-squares. And following the photo etching, I did a lot of deep etching and aqua tinting, and in the lower part I did 9 photo etchings to get the outline of my print, the C-squares, based on the print by Hokusai. That section of the plate didn't serve any real function. It didn't print. I didn't actually use it for printing image. I just put it there to look at.
It's Margie again! Welcome! You recording? Okay, this is called stenciling and surface rolling. This is your day to drop things. First there's that mask, and then there's this mask. This just holds the roller up so it won't roll over the edge.
You realize this is a 4-inch roller. A 4-inch roller will only apply ink uniformly for
Now I do this over and over.
about 12.5 inches. And the plate is 15 inches wide, so
Now this roller is too narrow to go over the whole plate in one revolution, so I have to do it from end to end. Since this roller is so small, I have to go in 2 directions. Then I have to feather. I have to feather the colors to meet each other. And they have to feather at different places, so the first I do it here, and then I do it here, and then I do it here, and then they all feather out even.
the inks that were shown in the first part of the videotape are the same ones I'm using now, so you get the connection between making the monotypes that were preparations for the monotype poster and the actual prints. So this is a pattern that I followed every day. I'd mix my colors out and blend them and do a monotype, and then those same colors were used as the background or the overall color for the print.
There. Now it's even. Then I can take the mask off and just touch it up a little bit. That mask helps this wave stay white in final print. And then there's a little edge here where the roller's a little too short, and I just soften that edge a little. And since that plate was so oily right there, the colors blend very nicely, and you can never see it.
That's a popular technique to use with rollers, especially in lithography, and you also see it in silkscreen. It's called blended color or rainbow rolling. It has different names, and in the trade they call it split fountain. Same technique I used when we printed the poster. You get the effect by frequent or numerous rollings back and forth, and every time you roll, the color gets a little more smooth.
Well, at least you guys will only be across the street.
There's Nancy and Norie, Margie, and Beth.
That's a good champagne picture.
Oh, where's your mirror? Oh, we gotta have a picture. Why don't you give it to Bill?
I shared Triangle Studios with 10 other artists, and on this particular day there were only about 5 or 6 who were able to make the afternoon champagne happy hour.
Come here. Are you still on the mirror? Yay! Come on.
Jeff Bishop,
Cheers! Cheers! We should get
these kinds of impromptu snacks were not uncommon at Triangle, particularly if we could find some reason, some excuse to celebrate. Then I go back to my pasting, back to the next stage and the last stage of the process, which all happens within about a 10-minute span of time.
You see, I do the edges with yes paste because it's a tougher paste than arrowroot starch. I've got these little beads of paste running along the edge. That'll be a challenge if you can see those beads. It will be a testament to my skill as a paster. Then I do the paste, the arrowroot starch.
Gone as close as I can go.
Yeah. With this,
It's weird, it's like a far away close-up.
yeah. But it's pretty. Now watch the paste come down.
This piece of paper is going to be laminated when the paper goes through the press. It's called chine collé, but of course you have to have a paste in between. In this instance I use 2. The Yes paste, which is a commercial paste, and then one that I make myself. It's very easy to make from arrowroot starch. You go to the health food store and you buy some arrowroot starch, and you mix it with a little cold water and you cook it to the consistency you want.
There. That should be about enough paste for the last print that I'm printing at Triangle. How's that look? Okay. Now I will hurry along, Norie, because I know you're in a hurry.
Indefinitely.
And I will get my paper and go over to the press bed. And I'll run it through.
I usually printed these on a Dutch etching paper. It's called Van Gelderzonen. I printed on a number of different kinds, again, in the spirit of the variable edition.
the tail. It's the tail.
The tail. Okay. And this gets warmed. This one gets warmed on the hot plate, you see?
Uh-oh.
There's my registration system. The ordering and the placing of the plate and the paper in relation to each other is called registration, and this ensures that if you have color areas that are supposed to line up with line areas, that kind of thing, then you have to have a registration system. So the plate goes down first after the paper is loaded into the press, and this is the hardest part registering the woodcut, which has the paste on the back. Now, this is the lightweight Japanese paper, and it's covered with paste, so it's damp and very soft and fragile. And you have to register it into those little marks and keep it from touching the plate as it goes through. Remember, there's just this layer of sticky ink laying on the plate, and if the Japanese paper fell down on it, it would tend to smear it, create an effect called push, which isn't very attractive to me. So the only way to avoid that is to hold the papers off the plate until they're actually going into the press and printing. Now, I don't have an assistant, so I've taught myself how to run this press with one hand and a foot. It's called the hand and foot method. Well, it leaves my other hand free to manage what's needed on the paper, holding up the paper, for example. And now you see the purpose of that thing called a tail, which is just a piece of carpeting with a bulldog clip attached to the end. That holds on to the etching paper to keep it from flopping down onto the plate before it's supposed to. And those who aren't familiar with this type of press, the other things are blankets, heavy wool blankets that make the impression. Okay, now that's the paper's down, and release the clip, and that's all there is to it.
Almost done. That was it. That was the last print.
Oh, everyone cries, last print.
The last print.
Everyone cries. Cry. They're not crying. They don't believe me. Here, Norie. Here's your champagne.
Come over to the other side, Norie. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, it's just gorgeous. Look at that, Norie. Now, wasn't it worth it? That's just perfect. Can you see it, Norie?
No, just a second.
Beautiful colors.
A variable edition print is a kind of monoprint insofar as there is no emphasis on making all of the prints identical. Instead, the printing process from the plates serves the artist as a means to discover different ways of perceiving the composition. It's somewhat like a musical performance or a musical score. No two performances of that piece are going to be identical.
Now it has to go into its waters. That's all. Thank you, Norie.
You're welcome.
It takes about 3 days to dry it out.